Chapter 25, Part 2, Muslim Eschatology, the perplexing Hadith, the Dajjal, the Beast, and Gog and Magog. Written and produced by Thomas Tyseal. Copyright Thomas Tyseal, unless otherwise noted. The Quran, of course, is the ultimate authority in Islam, but as noted, it says little beyond what is found in the Bible about the end times. The reported sayings of the Prophet, the Hadiths, are, however, a different matter. They contain many sayings of the Prophet about what may happen as the age approaches its end. Trouble is, the Hadiths were not written down till about 200 years after the Prophet lived, and there are many versions and many volumes and many contradictions. The first collection of hadiths, known as the Sahih al-Bukhari, was composed by al-Bukhari, who died in 870 of the Common Era, just shy of 240 years after Muhammad's death. Bukhari chose about 7,500 hadiths from among about 600,000 that he had collected. Many of the 7,500, however, are judged to be different versions of the same hadith, and so scholars think there are about 2,500 non-repeating hadiths. The second hadith collection is known as the Sahih Muslim and was composed by Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj, who was a contemporary of al-Bukhari but living in a different city. Once again, the editor chose from a large volume of circulating hadiths and published about 7,000 of them in 56 books. Modern English versions are usually 4 to 7 volumes. 6 collections of hadiths, including the 2 we just reviewed, are considered by the Sunni branch of Islam as canonical. These are known as the 6 books. Shias regard 4 sets of hadiths, known as the Al-Kitab al-Arba, as canonical, and also have a set of sayings related to Ali. There is overlap between the Sunni 6 books and the Shia 4 books. Islamic scholars vary widely in how they interpret the hadiths, as hadiths suffer at least 4 problems. It is impossible to know how well they really reflect the sayings of Muhammad. It is hard to know what events over the 1,400-year history of Islam they refer to, or if they refer to events yet ahead of us. The Quran itself, see it left, explains that some of the signs of the end have already occurred. Further, there have been very dramatic events in Islam that could have easily been the subject of prophecy. These include the Shia-Sunni split, the murder of many Shia imams, the conquest of the Middle East, northern Africa, and southern Spain, the fall of Constantinople to Mehmed II, the fall of Baghdad to the Mongols, the conquest of Timur, also called Tamerlane, the Crusades, and quite a few others. It's hard to see how some of the conflicting sayings can be reconciled or which to trust. It's hard to know if some of the hadiths are employing metaphors, and if so, what their meaning is. Indeed, as with some of the end-time traditions in Hinduism, some hadiths seem to reflect temporal prejudices and frozen historical understandings that do not align with any reasonable expectation as to what would be required to unite humanity and bring heaven to earth. These are suspect of innovation or poor transmission. It is, however, possible to identify a few anticipated events that are broadly represented in the end-time hadiths. These are the appearance of the Guided One, or Mahdi, the appearance or resurrection of Jesus, the appearance of a deceiver, a Dajjal, the appearance of a beast, and a battle with Gog and Magog. Let's see where a reasonable approach to interpreting these hadiths take us. The word Mahdi, or guided, is not in the Quran. In the Hadith, however, it appears in various forms, for example, as an imam or leader. In 3 of the canonical Sunni Hadiths we read, "The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, 'If only one day of this time in the world remained, Allah would raise up a man from my family who would fill this earth with justice as it has been filled with oppression.'" The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The Mahdi will be of my stock and will have a broad forehead and prominent nose. He will fill the earth with equity and justice, as it is filled with oppression and tyranny, and he will rule for 7 years. And Al-Mahdi is from my Ummah, family. He will be born and live to rule 5 or 7 or 9 years. If one goes to him and says, 'Give me a charity,' he will fill one's garment with what one needs." These seem to present a reasonable theme and can probably be trusted. In summary, Muslims expect a descendant of Muhammad to appear at the end times, to bring justice to the world, but his rule will be short. Just as false Christ arose and continue to arise in Christianity, the same has happened in Islam. In Islamic hadith, these false Christ are known as Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, literally deceitful Messiah, or simply Dajjal, meaning deceiver. The word Dajjal does not, however, appear in the Quran. One canonical hadith reads, "The hour," an alternative Quranic term for the end times, "will not be established until 2 big groups fight each other, whereupon there will be a great number of casualties on both sides, and they will be following one and the same religious doctrine until about 30 Dajjals appear, and each of them will claim that he is Allah's apostle." This prophecy seems easily fulfilled, as ever since the split between Shia and Sunni, both claiming the same religion, there have been many who have claimed leadership and deceived others. It's even possible to claim that the Middle Age battles between Christian and Muslims fulfill the prophecies, as both claim the faith of Father Abraham, and false prophets have arisen in both. The prophecy goes on, however, to suggest a more modern fulfillment. It states that the end will not come till the people compete with one another in constructing high buildings, till a man, when passing by a grave of someone, will say, "Would that I were in his place," until the sun rises from the west. So, when the sun will rise and the people will see it rising from the west, they will all believe, but that will be the time when, as Allah said, "No good will it do to a soul to believe then, if it believed not before, nor earn good by deeds of righteousness through its faith." High buildings, of course, are a feature of modern times. The phrase, "the sun will rise in the west," is either suggesting that normality will be shattered, as we saw in the Quran when it referred to seas being on fire, or it may refer to the light of civilization appearing in the West, a modern phenomenon. The Hadith suggests that end times will be so bad as to turn non-believers into believers, but by that time it will be too late, as neither good deeds nor faith will save them, a theme repeated in the collection of hadiths called the Jami at-Tarimidi, and in many other places. We'll examine a few other hadiths related to Dajjals before we come to a conclusion as to the meaning of Dajjal. While the word Dajjal just means deceiver, and there have been many in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, some hadiths seem to grant a special role to the last Dajjal before or during the end times. One hadith reads, "When a young man asked Muhammad to bear witness that he, Ibn Sayyid, was God's messenger, Muhammad reproached him. Thereupon one of Muhammad's followers offered to strike the young man, whereupon Muhammad replied, "If he is the same Dajjal who would appear near the last hour, you would not be able to overpower him. And if he is not that, there is no good for you to kill him." The same hadith goes on to relay characteristics of the coming Dajjal. Muhammad said, "I warn you of him, the coming Dajjal, and there is no prophet who has not warned his people against the Dajjal. Even Noah warned against him. But I am going to tell you a thing which no prophet told his people. You must know that he, the Dajjal, is one-eyed, and Allah, the Exalted and Glorious, is not one-eyed." The prophecy that the Dajjal will be one-eyed is probably the most related hadith about the Dajjal, occurring hundreds of times, but it's likely that Muhammad was not relaying a physical characteristic, but a spiritual one, an unwillingness to see God's cause correctly, perhaps coupled with presenting it falsely to others. Given that prophets since Noah have warned against the Dajjal, it may be that the Dajjal is not a single person, but anyone who is blind to and opposes God's cause. In this respect, the Dajjal seems quite similar to the Antichrist spoken of in Christianity. The evangelist John told his congregation that, quote, "You have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come." Thus, anyone who opposes Christ was an Antichrist. The same seems true of the Dajjal. The Hadith suggests that the spiritual blindness may be so widespread at the end times that this opposition and misrepresentation cannot be overpowered before judgment occurs. Another hadith says that the Dajjal will attack Medina but not succeed. Is this past or future? Medina was attacked by Meccan polytheists during the lifetime of Muhammad at the Battle of Uhud in 625, and later at the Battle of the Ditch in 627. The leaders of these attacking forces could easily qualify as Dajjals. Medina was also attacked by the Umayyad Caliph Yazid I, the son of Muawiyah. Recall from the last chapter that in the view of Muhammad's family, Muawiyah falsely claimed to be the caliph rising against Ali. Ali was Muhammad's cousin, son-in-law, favored disciple, and in the view of Shias, Muhammad's designated successor. Muawiyah not only claimed to be the caliph, he appointed his son Yazid as his successor. It was in fact Yazid who had Ali killed near Karbala. When this happened, those who were loyal to the family of Muhammad in Medina rebelled against Yazid, who then sent an army to suppress and sack Medina in 683. Yazid was victorious in the Battle of Al-Hara outside Medina, but as the hadith indicated, ultimately failed in suppressing the Shia revolt. This hadith seems to refer to these past events. Alternatively, the Dajjal could simply represent any person who acts with duplicity against the cause of God. Once again, let me issue a warning. While it's important to consider Shia interpretations of the end-time events, this in no way vindicates current Shias, nor does it condemn current Sunnis. Both biblical and Quranic indications are that the end times represent a universal judgment based on reactions to events in these end times and to one's general behavior. No one knows if anyone will be judged favorably or damned, and it's a mistake to pass judgment on others based on scriptural interpretation. Judgment belongs to God, not to us. One prophecy says that the Dajjal will come from the east. Another says he will come from Khorasan and will be followed by a people who appear as if their faces are shields coated with leather. As you can see here, Khorasan consisted of northeastern Iran, southern Turkmenistan, and northern Afghanistan and Tajikistan. In the 13th century, Khorasan was part of the Turco-Persian Sunni Muslim Khwarezmian Empire, then perhaps the greatest power in the Islamic world. It was an important buffer protecting Muslims from the Mongols, whose faces, in the view of Arabs, could easily be described as shield-like, that is, flat, and coated with leather. In 1215, Genghis Khan's armies invaded and captured Khorasan, killing 1 million Muslims. Was Genghis Khan the Dajjal spoken of in this hadith? If so, then this is not an end-time prophecy at all, but rather a prophecy about the Mongol invasion. Mongols did not stop with Khorasan, but captured all of the Muslim lands of what is now Iran, Iraq, Syria, and some of Turkey, then continuing into Russia, Poland, and Hungary, stopping only about 1242. In the end, beginning about 1295, many Mongol leaders became Muslim, but they were not Muslim when they began their conquest. Arguing against a modern fulfillment are hadiths such as this. You have heard about a city, one side of which is on land and the other is in the sea, Constantinople. They said, Allah's messenger, yes. Thereupon he said, the last hour would not come unless 70,000 persons from Bani Ishaq, that is, descendants of Isaac, would attack it. Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in 1453. Estimates of his troop strength vary from 50,000 to 150,000. On top of this was his navy, with somewhere between 100 and 400 ships. Of these fighters, a good number were Bani Ishaq, descendants of Isaac, that is, Jews and Christians. What is known for sure is that those of Christian descent played the most crucial role in Mehmed's victory. The verses continue. When they, the sons of Isaac, would land there, they will neither fight with weapons nor would shower arrows, but would only say, there is no God but Allah, and Allah is the greatest. Weapons and arrows were certainly used in the siege, but as you'll see, victory was more a matter of the faith of Mehmed's most elite troops of Christian background. The verses go on to explain that there would be 3 assaults on the wall, we assume of Constantinople, and that each time after the cry of, there is no God but Allah and Allah is the greatest, one side of the great city would fall. After the 3rd cry, the verses say, the gates would be opened for them and they would enter therein. The final coordinated land and sea assault occurred on May 29, 1453. It's hard to know which assaults are part of the 3 mentioned in the prophecy, but what is clear is that there were 3 sides to the triangular-shaped Constantinople and 3 assaults in the final successful attack. This final attack was focused on 2 gates, the gate of St. Romanus near the middle of the western wall, which is known as the Theodosian Wall, and the gate of Block Emme at the northernmost corner of the walled city. The first assault was led by Christian conscripts. While it failed, without it the rest of the assaults would not have succeeded, as the goal was to wear out the defenders of the wall. The second assault began after the first. This group was made of regular Turkish soldiers, and it too failed, but further weakened the defenders. The third and final assault used Mehmed's most elite troops, the Janissaries. They were once Christian boys, Thus, sons of Isaac, the Bani Ishak in the prophecy, from the Balkans who had been removed from their families, brought up as Muslims, and given elite training and education, kept separate from others to build cohesion, and conscripted into a special unit protecting the Sultan and the Ottoman army. They were also fiercely devoted Muslims. A group of Janissaries were able to enter a passage to the already damaged Blockernay Gate. Byzantines had used a small gated passageway in the gate to sally forth and engage Muslims. Unfortunately, after the Byzantines' last retreat from their sally, the gate had been left unlocked. A group of Janissaries entered and were able to open the outer gates and let Mehmet's forces in, thus fulfilling the prophecy that at the third Muslim cry of "There is no God but Allah, and Allah is the greatest," the gates would be opened by the sons of Isaac, that is, the Janissaries. This Turkish advance might have been rebuffed, save that at the same time the commander of the Byzantine wall was gravely wounded and removed from the field of battle. When his men saw this, they lost their nerve and abandoned the wall, returning to their homes to try and protect their families. Thus, each of the three-sided Constantinople fell by 3 attacks on all 3 sides of the city. The final words of the prophecy explains that after Constantinople fell, they, the Turkish soldiers, would be collecting spoils of war and distributing them amongst themselves, when a noise would be heard saying, "Verily, Dajjal has come," and thus they would leave everything there and go back. Many Muslims believe that this verse means that the entire Hadith refers to a future event, as the Dajjal, in their view, has not come. The Dajjal here, however, is probably not a person, but the spirit of corruption that enters when one seeks the spoils of war above establishing the sovereignty of God. The prophecy is making clear that faithful Muslim soldiers are not deceived by these attractions and will leave them behind. The Hadith almost certainly refers to 1453, when Constantinople fell, as any other interpretation becomes extremely problematic. Based on what we've reviewed, we can confidently conclude that the Dajjal is not a single person, nor was the Antichrist, but anyone who falsely claims, usurps, or opposes divine authority, or who prefers worldly riches over faithfulness to divine teachings. Based on the Quran and Hadith, Muslims anticipate the return of Jesus, or the one with a new name foretold by Jesus at the time of the end. In the Hadiths we read, "I heard the Prophet said, 'What will be your condition when the Son of Mary will come down to you, and your Imam,' that is the Mahdi, 'will be from amongst you?' A similar Hadith reads, 'I heard the Messenger of Allah say, a section of my people will not cease fighting for the truth and will prevail till the day of resurrection.' He said, Jesus, son of Mary, would then descend, and their Muslim commander would invite him to come and lead them in prayer, but he would say, 'No, some amongst you are commanders over some amongst you. This is the honor from Allah from this ummah.'" As shown previously, another reads, "Allah's messenger said, 'By him in whose hands my soul is, surely Jesus, the son of Mary, will soon descend amongst you, and will judge mankind justly, as a just ruler. He will break the cross and kill the pigs, and there will be no jizya, taxation taken from non-Muslims.'" Hadiths about the return of Jesus can be hard to interpret. One in the Sahih Muslim starts with the familiar warning about the Dajjal being one-eyed and then adds that he would stay on earth for 40 days, one day like a year, and one day like a month, and one day like a week, and the rest of the days would be like your days. This is almost impossible to interpret, given we don't know the starting date, nor how literal to treat the prophecy. Interpreted literally, the time span is generally reckoned to 428 days, using a 354-day lunar year. That works out to a year, 2 months, and a week, but there's nothing of historic note that fits this time frame, especially as we don't know when the time span begins. So if the prophecy was accurately remembered, the meaning is likely more hidden. The rest is easier to interpret. The prophecy states that the Dajjal appears between Syria and Iraq. The early battles that occurred between Shia and Sunnis occurred between Syria, where Sunni forces were headquartered, and Iraq, where Shia forces were camped. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's chosen successor, from the Shia perspective, was martyred in Iraq by a Qajarite who had rebelled against him. Thus, this fits with our understanding of the Dajjal as anyone who opposes the authority of God's chosen agent. The Hadith then goes on to explain how Dajjals work. They seduce believers with promises of prosperity and wealth, which may come if people follow them. The Hadith also notes that one group will not follow the way of Dajjals and will experience hardship. This fits well the fate of Sunnis who went on to run a prosperous empire and Shias who faced relentless persecution. Once again, it is not our job to either praise or blame current Muslims. Our job is only to understand how Islam developed and infer what we can about the meaning of prophecies. The Hadith then goes on to talk about the return of Jesus. It says that he will descend at a minaret at the eastern side of Damascus, wearing garments dyed with saffron, his hands resting on the shoulders of 2 angels. Water will flow from his hair, which is beaded with silvery pearls. The Hadith then says that non-believers who reek of self will die, and that Jesus will then search for the Dajjal, catch him and kill him at the gate of Lud. There's clearly a lot of metaphor here, so interpreting it literally makes no sense. The eastern side of Damascus could refer to the East Damascus or anything east of Damascus. Damascus could also refer to Sunni Islam, as Damascus was the capital of the Umayyad dynasty that broke Islam into 2, Shia and Sunni. In this case, the prophecy is that Jesus would return in the Shia lands east of Sunni lands and will eventually triumph over those who reek of selfish corruption and follow the Dajjal. As to the gate of Lod in Hebrew, at the time of Muhammad it was a small Byzantine city of about 6,000 people between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Its population was predominantly Christian, and it was noted as being a place where some 300 years before Muhammad, the Byzantine Emperor Diocletian had forced many Christians there to renounce their faith. Among those killed during this persecution was a Christian Roman soldier now known as St. George. St. George's tomb in Lud was a popular place of Christian pilgrimage and was known to Muslims as Lud was also a strategic gateway to Jerusalem. After the 10th century, and thus some 300 years after Muhammad, St. George began to be symbolized in art as slaying a dragon, the dragon being the forces against Christ, i.e. Antichrist. The Hadith says that Jesus will kill the Dajjal at the gate of Lud. As we've seen, the Dajjal is a symbol for falsely claiming authority over God's agents, or claiming divine agency, while really being attracted by riches or power. This spirit cannot be literally killed. The meaning must be symbolic. Right must triumph over wrong, whether symbolized as Jesus slaying the Dajjal or St. George slaying the dragon. As to Lud, note that the root of the Arabic word for Lud means to contend or fiercely oppose by arguing, and thus conquering the Dajjal by the gate of Lud may simply mean that the Dajjal Antichrist must be verbally slayed so that truth wins out over error. Today, the site where St. George is buried is venerated by both Christians and Muslims, as shown by the diagram of the building on site shown here. At the end time, the Quran says that a beast will speak to those who do not believe in God and the resurrection. The grammar here is complicated, and interpreters vary as to the meaning. The translation by Yusuf Ali and the one by Pickthall are the easiest to understand. Pickthall translates as follows: Lo, thou canst not make the dead to hear, nor canst thou make the deaf to hear the call when they have turned to flee. Nor canst thou lead the blind out of their error. Thou canst make none to hear, save those who believe our revelations and who have surrendered. And when the word is fulfilled concerning them, we shall bring forth a beast of the earth to speak unto them, because mankind had not faith in our revelations, and remind them of the day when we shall gather out of every nation a host of those who denied our revelations, and they will be set in array. The Arabic word for beast means any moving creature, even humans. In the Bible, beasts can be agents of good or evil. They can be symbols of divine power or agents who utter proud words and blaspheme God. They can be nations, religions, angels, demons, people, or animals. The beast here is clearly a symbol of divine retribution against those who do not believe in God in the last day. Note that judgment is against those who did not believe in God's revelations, plural. That is, the revelations of the past, which include all people of the book, people who follow God's law in any country. As to the identity of this creature, the Quran is silent and interpreters vary. The Hadiths offer a little more detail. One reads, The beast will emerge and will have with it the seal of Solomon and the staff of Moses. It will make the faces of believers shine with the staff and will mark the noses of the disbelievers with the seal. The Quran notes that Solomon had the power to control wind, animals, and spirits. In the Talmud, this same power is conveyed by the seal on Solomon's ring, on which is inscribed the name of God. Thus, the Hadith is picking up an ancient Jewish story about Solomon's seal. In the Talmud, the ring containing the seal falls into the hands of a demon, causing Solomon to lose his power. Eventually, however, he recovered the ring and was able to regain his throne. As to Moses' staff, in the Torah, the staff represents God's conquering sovereignty over man and nature. The Hadith, then, is conveying an important message. In referencing Solomon and Moses, it reaffirms the revelations of the past and their function in separating believers and non-believers, rewarding believers and punishing unbelievers. It also implies that the sovereignty of God's kingdom, once secure under Solomon but lost, like his ring, due to Jewish transgressions, will at the end times be reestablished as the mountain of the Lord's house to which all nations will stream. So, once again, we see that the beast in the Quran and the Hadith is an end-time agent confirming and wielding the power of Solomon and Moses, passing judgment on those who have not believed in God, and is called to right behavior and establishing God's all-embracing, long-promised kingdom on earth. In Genesis 10, we are introduced to Magog, the grandson of Noah. By the time we get to Ezekiel 38, Magog becomes the land where Gog lives. In Revelation 20, Gog and Magog becomes the four corners of the earth, where the deceived gather to make war on God's people. The deceived lose, and thereupon they are thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. This, of course, is a different beast than we just discussed. In the Quran, a helpless people are threatened by forces of corruption, represented by Gog and Magog, people who do great mischief on earth. Though they dimly understand his language, the defenseless people appealed to Zul-Qarnain, a two-horned beast who punishes wrongdoers, pleading as follows: O Zul-Qarnain, surely Gog and Magog make mischief in the land. Shall we then pay you a tribute on condition that you should raise a barrier between us and them? He said, That in which my Lord has established me is better. Therefore you only help me with workers. I will make a fortified barrier between you and them. A related hadith states that before the end time, the people of Gog and Magog dig under the wall every night, only to find in the morning that God has restored the wall until the appointed day. When the wall was finished, the beast said, This is a mercy from my Lord, but when the promise of my Lord comes to pass, he will make it level with the ground, and the promise of my Lord is ever true. And on that day we will leave a part of them in conflict with one another, and the trumpet will be blown, so we will gather them all together. The general meaning is that the forces of chaos and corruption, Gog and Magog, will constantly threaten civilization and will one day succeed in overwhelming society. Then judgment will occur upon all. But who is the two-horned beast? Many candidates have been proposed, from Alexander the Great and Cyrus the Great to any protector of innocence. Alexander and Cyrus, however, lie in the distant past from the time of Muhammad. The passage here is future-oriented. There is, however, a biblical parallel that should be explored, as we have seen that messages in the Bible and Quran reinforce each other. In chapter 8, verse 20 of the book of Daniel, there is a ram with two horns representing the kings of Media and Persia. It could well be that this is the same beast to which the Quran referred, save that it refers to events in the future from Muhammad, not the past. In that case, the message of the prophecy is that some group of Persians, whose language is different from the Arabic in the Quran, of course, will try to defend civilization, perhaps Islamic civilization, but that in the end their efforts will not be successful. The forces of corruption and chaos are just too great and will eventually overwhelm all. Thus the end of the age will come, and a new age where all authority belongs to God will be established. If this biblical interpretation is correct, once again we should look for events in Islam around the year 1260 or 1844 of the Western calendar, but this time in Persia. A few hadiths sum up the signs at the end times as follows. The Messenger of Allah said, It, the last hour, will not come until you see 10 signs before, and in this connection, he made a mention of the smoke, Dajjal, the beast, the rising of the sun from the west, the descent of Jesus, son of Mary, Allah be pleased with him, the Gog and Magog, and landslides in 3 places, one in the east, one in the west, and one in Arabia, at the end of which fire would burn forth from the Yemen and would drive people to their place of their assembly. Note that this list does not include the coming Mahdi, though it is a central theme in other hadiths. The Mahdi could arrive before or to initiate these signs. In another hadith, the list of 10 items is shortened to 5 or 6. This list leaves out the descent of Jesus and the landslides in 3 places and substitutes general turmoil and the death of masses for the appearance of Gog and Magog. Recall from the Quran that some of the signs may have already occurred. It reads, "Are they only waiting for the hour to take them by surprise? And yet some of its signs have already come." We've discussed 5 of the above 10 signs: the Dajjal, the beast, the rising of the sun from the west, the return of Jesus, and Gog and Magog. The 6th sign, smoke, is a product of fire. Smoke is a biblical symbol for the nearness of God, as well as his power, glory, and wrath. Smoke also obfuscates things, making it hard to see what is there, and in the Quran, it's a symbol of the last days. We can see that smoke, as a sign of the nearness of God, was already present in the revelation of Muhammad, as was the obscuring smoke caused by the lies and deception of those who rebelled against him. Thus, that sign may have already come and will likely come again. The 7th, 8th, and 9th signs are landslides, or, as they're called in the Bible, earthquakes. In both cases, they represent more than physical earthquakes. They are spiritual earthquakes, the earth of our religious understandings and affiliations shifting beneath our feet, caused by a nearness of God, as we see in the Bible, and especially in both the Bible and the Quran, referring to judgment at the end times. In addition, like famines and wars between nations, earthquakes are not frequent. They mark long passages of time, which the New Testament said would have to pass before the second coming of Jesus, which Muslims also await. The 10th sign is fire coming from Yemen, driving people to their place of assembly. Some versions identify the port city of Aden as being the place in Yemen where the fire would start. Other Muslim commentators, however, believe the place of assembly is somewhere in the Levant. The place of assembly could simply be any place people around the world turn to in catastrophic times, or a symbol for the gathering together of mankind for judgment. As we've seen, one can argue that many, if not all, of these signs, which are of course spiritual, not physical signs, have or are being realized. There has been smoke, many deceivers, the sun has risen from the west, Gog and Magog, chaos and corruption, have surely filled much of the earth. There have been powerful spiritual earthquakes, revelations in the east, in Arabia, and in the west. And for all we know, Jesus may have already come, and we may be being judged by the beast, which sorts out believers from non-believers, even now. Given all this, it seems prudent to be on the lookout for further signs that we are in the end times, and to also look for a deliverer. Note, however, the message of the Bible that the meaning of end-time signs will only be known by those who discover the promised one, those who wake up and find the thief in the night. So, too, the Quran indicates that the hour will come upon them suddenly while they do not perceive. We need to be awake and perceptive. We must not be foolish, however, accepting false prophets and crazy interpretations. Rather, we should use reasonable interpretations of the signs in the Bible and the Quran to evaluate claims. We know that any divine intervention must be visible, like lightning from the east, or, as the Quran puts it, like lightning which nearly takes away eyesight and stuns sight. This means that the cause of the promised one will not be obscure nor arise in secret, as Jesus also made plain. His cause must be open and large enough to cause social and religious earthquakes that make an historical impression. We should also expect that there will be both opposition and denial. Indeed, it will be as Muhammad said, that people will put their fingers in their ears to avoid hearing God's call, and that no messenger came to people except that they ridiculed him. Another sign is that the movement and its leaders must have good character and act nobly. As the Bible puts it, a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. And as the Quran notes, true servants of God are humble. Perhaps the most important sign is that the promised one must reveal and establish an institution of justice to settle disputes in the world and bring peace. That's the ancient promise from the time of Abraham, supported by the Hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud, which says, "He will fill the earth with justice and fairness, as it was filled with injustice and oppression." The end-time prophecies of the Quran and Hadith make clear, as will any reasonable analysis of the signs of our times, that we are far away from the new heaven and new earth for which we long. Neither Judaism, nor Christianity, nor Islam, nor any other revelation from the East has delivered the peace and justice we yearn for. While we may be in the end times, our promised civilization is yet ahead of us. To get there, we must make peace with all past religions, and that certainly includes Islam. So, in our next chapter, let's examine some lingering concerns that are often voiced about Islam and see if these worries resolve when we consider context and what the revelation actually says.